We are homeless. Well, technically, we're on the road. We've been traveling since October 2021 after leaving Australia and ending up in Mexico. And since that time, we've spent 18 months in Mexico and the rest of the time in between in about 6 different countries. I'm Laban Ditchburn.
And I'm Anna Ditchburn.
And welcome back to another episode of Purpose Partners for Life. In this episode, we're going to talk to you about the things that we've done to stay on the road. We have the luxury of being able to work anywhere, but when you leave your home and your base of operations, it can be quite a scary and daunting task. So we just wanted to share some of the things that we've been doing to make this whole experience truly miraculous.
Yeah, so many people ask us, how do you do this? How do you travel the world and not being afraid of where you're gonna stay, where you're gonna end up, what is gonna happen to you? So if you're interested, stay tuned.
So just to fill you in, at the time of recording, we had just spent 3 months in India, traveling across Mumbai, Hyderabad, Goa, Bangalore, Delhi, Agra, which is where the Taj Mahal is, and Jaipur. After that, we flew into the United States. All of this has been on a tourist visa as well, by the way. And prior to that, we spent 18 months, minus some trips to the US, living out of Playa del Carmen in Mexico, one of the most beautiful places on planet Earth. And it's about a 45-minute drive from Cancun for all you people interested in geography. But when we left Australia in 2021, we kind of left under duress or under very challenging circumstances. As you go through this channel, you'll come to learn about more and more of Anna and I's story. But when we left separately, and we weren't married at the time. And my wife, Anna here, had to go back to Russia for some urgent family business, and some of which we'll go to in a minute. Because of the nature of getting a visa, I couldn't have left to go with Anna at that time. And this was during the lockdowns of 2021 in Melbourne. We still weren't allowed to travel more than 3 miles from our home at times. We weren't allowed to move interstate, and we sure as heck weren't able to head overseas unless you had a very, very good reason.
So I had to go back to Russia to testify against my stepfather. And I have to be in Russia in person, otherwise the case wouldn't go ahead. It was a very challenging time because back in Australia, you have to get a special permit to leave the country.
As Australian citizens.
As Australian citizens. The Australian government having all the information about what is the reason me going to Russia, which is testifying against the pedophile, they rejected my first application. And I had only 5 days left until the case would be closed. We didn't know what to do. And so we started to do a research because, when you have an intention, the opportunity will come into your life. And we went to Facebook groups, just asking people for help, or knowing that some people were able to leave the country. What can we do? We found some really amazing information. And plus, I asked the Russian police to send me a special letter demanding me being in Russia in person. And so I finally got approved my application. And when I was leaving Australia, I just had 4 people in the whole plane. How big was the plane?
Jumbo jet, a 747. And so Anna heads back to Russia. And as part of the conditions for getting the permit to leave the country, the Australian government mandated that you needed to be out of the country for 3 months, for 12 weeks as an Australian citizen. What you're supposed to do overseas, is on you. So while Anna's back in Russia doing her thing, we had been planning to move from the state of Victoria, where we lived in Melbourne, up to Queensland, Australia, which is, for any fans of the Crocodile Hunter, that's where Australia Zoo is. And it's probably the equivalent to maybe like what Florida would have been. Had been open a lot longer and didn't have quite the restrictions. And my younger brother and his beautiful family live up there, and we were going to live close to them so we could be with them. So I'd started to pack up our apartment And then I realized something. I didn't want to be away from my beautiful bride or bride to be. And so I was like, I need to get out of here as well. Now, I'm a writer, a speaker, I'm a podcaster, I'm a coach. And my first book, which is called Bet On You, was becoming available at the end of the year. My publisher, whose husband was an attorney, a high-powered attorney out of Connecticut in the United States, wrote a letter demanding that I be made available to the for the Frankfurt International Book Messe. Now, the Book Messe is the largest book fair of any place on the planet. And Anna's application was rejected once and then approved. Mine was rejected once, twice, and then on the third time it was approved. So about 3 weeks later, I was able to get out of Australia and jump on I had a 747 with 11 passengers on it, a Singapore Airlines flight with 13 crew. And I was able to get out to Frankfurt in Germany, where I was able to go to attend this event, and we were able to get out of the country. When we were away, we realized something really significant. We didn't want to be held prisoner in our own country anymore. We didn't want to be subject to the tyranny that was happening with the government at that point. And with whatever your political views on this whole thing, freedom's a hell of a drug. And with what we wanted to achieve in our lives, we knew that our lives were going to be better suited somewhere else. Now, what happened next was even more interesting. Anna went through the case. The case ended up being dismissed because it was outside of the statute of limitations and there wasn't enough evidence because it had happened such a long time ago. And I'll get Anna to tell her story in a minute about what she did after that. But she said to me, come and meet me in Russia. So, because as we've shared on some of the other videos, the challenges we've had around making babies at this point, collectively, Anna and I have had 19 consecutive miscarriages.
By July 8th?
This is July 8th, 2023. And there was a number of really brilliant gynecologists in the medical system in Russia. It's actually really good where Anna's from. And so she said, would you come and meet me in Russia to be with me, to support me? And I said, of course. Now, I had my passport on me and I had to ship it back.
Australian passport.
This is my Australian passport. And I hold an Australian and a New Zealand passport, just to give you some context. I shipped my passport back to Australia so it could be sent to the Russian consulate so they could put the the visa stamp in there. Excuse me. And a day after I sent the visa, Russia shut its borders to the rest of the world because COVID cases had gone up again. Well, about 2 days after that, Germany shut its borders to the rest of the world because of COVID cases.
And so I couldn't come to Germany.
So she couldn't come and meet me. So here I am. I'm in Berlin at this point, which is where I recorded my audiobook. So that's just one of the blessings that came out of that. And I'm like, what are we going to do now? So thankfully, my younger brother shipped my New Zealand passport to me, but it still took 3 weeks. So here I am roaming around Russia, or roaming around Germany rather, with no passport. At the stage, financially, we were in a very, very tight place because I hadn't been able to work for the last couple of years and I wasn't eligible for any of the government payouts during the lockdown situation. So 3 weeks later, I get my passport and I said to Anna, where can we go? Because we had chosen not to get the jab and we'd chosen to exercise our medical freedoms. And the only place that was available anywhere on the planet, as far as we could find, was Mexico. And I remember I'd done a boys trip there in 2011 with four of my friends and found this beautiful place, Playa del Carmen. And I said, babe, we're going to Mexico. And 7 weeks after we first parted ways, the most amount of time we spent apart was only a couple of days at a time. We reunited at the airport in Cancun in the most emotional, warm embrace you can possibly imagine. And so what's the reason for telling you this? Well, it's really to inspire you to figure out solutions to major adversity and challenges in your life. This is not the Laban and Anna show. We just want to create a platform where we can share ideas that have been really valuable for us and have allowed us to overcome unimaginable adversity in a time where we're told that you can't do this and you can't do that and you must do this and you must do that. Well, I'm here to tell you firsthand that the more you get told no when your back's up against the wall, the more resourceful you can become. And so don't ever take no as the first answer. Don't take it even as the second or third, right? Or the fourth or the fifth, because you will develop this incredible skill set that you didn't even know you had. And that's not even 1/100th of some of the experiences that we've had over the last nearly 5 years that Anna and I have been together. And what I would love Anna to do now is to tell her part of the story when she was in Russia and what happened after the criminal trial finished.
Another lesson what I've learned during this whole experience is ask for help and keep asking until you get this help, as our dear friend Les Brown said. Because growing up in Russia, it was a very tough environment, and I didn't like asking for help. I was trying to do everything myself. And bear in mind, I was working at those time. I was lucky to keep my job during the pandemic in Australia, and I love my job. And I didn't want to leave it because I felt guilty that I'm leaving my job. What can I do? And thanks to Laban, he gave me a really amazing tip. And he said, Anna, you have to talk to your manager. His name is Richard. You have to tell Richard what is going on and what is the real reason you have to go to Russia. And I was scared because the story I was about to tell was not easy. I didn't know how it's going to be received. But I finally had the courage to tell my manager why I need to be in Russia. And I had to be in Russia for at least a month. So I could not afford to take holidays for a month. And I had to tell them. And thanks God, my manager was so understanding and was so supportive. And he asked me, would you like to take 3 months instead? And the reason why he was so supportive is because I explained to him that I will have to go through a very hard procedure. It's a polygraph, testimonials, medical examination, physical examination, like everything. It was like a hell. And I told him truthfully, I probably wouldn't be able to be 100% present at my work as I want to. And I wouldn't be able to give my 100%. And bless my manager, he allowed me to take these 3 months. And in the process, while I was in Russia, going through this hell with the police and testimonials, I've realized that we don't have any childhood sexual abuse survivors support in my hometown. And I really wanted to do something about it. And I decided to go public with my story. And I called the biggest publishers in my hometown, and only one journalist agreed to publish my story. And the article went live when we moved to Mexico already, and it went viral. And I left my email address there saying, girls, if you are going through something similar and you have no one to talk to, send me an email. Hundreds and hundreds of emails from women and men saying, thank you so much for opening up. Thank you so much for bringing this to the attention, to people's attention. I needed to hear this story. And some women even wanted to share their own stories to support me. Now, the case was closed, unfortunately, but it was a very, very good lesson for me to see how many people are out there, are still struggling in silence, still suffering in silence. And that's what put me on the path of, I want to help people. I want to become the loudest voice for those people who are still afraid to come publicly or share their stories. And I started my own podcast. I started coaching people, knowing how hypnotherapy helped me to overcome my childhood trauma, I wanted to do the same for people. And during this time in Russia, I realized, you know what, I don't want to get back to my job. I want to do something more. I wanted to do something bigger. And I started learning how to become a hypnotherapist. I was doing the podcast, interviewing amazing people who were sharing their incredible stories of overcoming their trauma. And it was the greatest blessing. Even though we went through those challenges, it was the greatest blessing for us to realize what we want to do, who we want to become.
And if you want to check out Anna's podcast, it's called Happy on the Inside. And my podcast, if you want to check that as well, is on YouTube and all the platforms. It's called Become Your Own Superhero Podcast. And so, but this podcast, Purpose Partners for Life, is especially for people that want to improve their relationships. They want to learn how to meet their ideal partner. They want to learn how to manage traveling all over the world without having a lot of money. It's for how to circumvent life's major challenges. Whatever we've been able to go through is the stuff that we want to share. And we want to share raw and unabashed. So we'll make the apology in advance for sharing anything that might be a trigger warning or trigger people or whatever. But we do this with the utmost love and best intentions for people to have a real resource in a social media world where there's so many falsities and there's so much bullshit. And you know, the fights and the challenges that we go through in our own journey, we are going to talk about these in real, raw and honest ways, because there's nothing worse than, you know, following someone that you're inspired by and then coming to find out that they're completely a different person. We know and we get that people are craving the truth and honesty in a world full of so much malarkey and just incredible deception. So that's our intention for this episode. Stay tuned for more episodes. Go and check out the other videos that have been posted as well. They are going to resonate with you or not. It doesn't matter. But if you like this stuff, give it a like and drop a comment in there. It really helps the reach. Share it with someone you care about, more importantly. If you would like more information about what Anna and I are up to and links to all the social media and some of the free courses that are available, go into the description section. There'll be a link where you can go and subscribe and get access to all this amazing stuff as well.
All right. See you soon.